Hi, and welcome to the training video on how to create banners using our banner framework created by Publicis London. This set of classes for ActionScript 2 and 3 was created by Alan Elliott and myself, Richard Nelson. So let's get to it. So right away you'll see here I've got my folder set up for creating a basic standard banner for DFA systems. We have an assets folder which we use to hold all the assets that we'll use to create the banner. We also have a bin folder. This is where we publish all the SWIFTs and any deliverables for the banner. And then we have a source folder, and this will house our classes and Flash source files for the banner. This is the banner we're going to be creating. So we've got 3 frames here, and it goes to an end frame. We'll probably want to have this banner loop through 3 times and then come to a rest on the final frame. So start by going to Flash Develop. This is our preferred ActionScript authoring environment on the PC, but feel free to use what you like. And let's create a new project. And this will be for ActionScript 3, so we'll do that publishing through the Flash IDE. So let's make sure that we're creating this for the right directory. So this is our standard banner class that we'll extend from. It's got lots of functions and properties that we can manipulate that are like streamlined for banner development. These are the private variables that we often have to set for making a standard banner, and we set those in the constructor, gives them some default values. We have an init function that starts the banner. This will be called after one frame is passed. And this is where we set the banner to be visible. We add a click tag, set which loop we're currently on, and also set initial values for all movie clips in the banner. After that, we call the reset method. This reset method is the method that would be called every time the banner processes a loop. So it will refresh all of the assets or images and text and such to the state it should start at for when your banner begins its animation. Here we have the set properties method. This is just kind of a quality of life method to help when you're doing your reset function, set a bunch of properties to a similar value. For instance, you might have 10 text movie clips that just hold text, and they all need to be changed so that they start invisible. As long as those text fields are named with the same prefix and then order subsequently with a different integer from 0 to, let's say, 9, this will run through all of them for you and set the alpha state or whatever property you want to set it in common and do it all. The setup animation method is called by the reset function. This is what adds all the tweens into a queue so that they can play back. It adds your basic tweens, which through add animation. Then it adds the tweens that are necessary to process for the banner to loop back to the start, so that way you can have a smooth transition rather than something just jump. And it also has an additional option that's optional to use, which is add animation end. And that's for the rare circumstance where you might have a banner who, when it actually comes to the end of looping, you want it to rest on a specific end frame that's different from the other loops. These are the methods then that will override. Once again, we have add animation loop, and add animation end. Reset clips is another quality of life method. This is just to help reset things in the beginning. Our method up above, find movie clips, what that does is it actually goes through movie clip and embedded movie clip and all the nested movie clips within your main timeline, and it will take all the default values and store them on an object that it calls init values. And that way at a later time you might want to say, look, I want you to just tween to the X or the Y, whatever it was set up, where I left that particular instance in the IDE. We use Tween Nano from GreenSock to do our transitions. To just make it easier, there's some things that we always are setting, such as to overwrite to be false, because we're queuing up a bunch of animations. So our add animation method is what we use to add your basic animation. So you set the target you want to animate, its duration, and then the variables that you want to animate, and that includes any type of specific properties that are for Tween Nano, such as delay or easing. Add staggers, another method that helps add animations to the Tween Nano engine. This one takes an array instead of just a singular target, and then it will tween all these different objects that you supply to the array in order to a similar duration and similar variables. You can set a stagger time so that each animation is separated by X amount of seconds. Finally, we have delayed call here, and this again passes things to Tween Nano in case you want to call a certain function at a certain time during the course of your animation. So the first thing we need to do here is extend this class to create our own. So let's go and make a new class. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create the Flash source for this file, import our assets, get all our instances set up on the stage and ready so that we can start action scripting and animating the banner. So we'll start there by going into our source folder, and we will create a new Flash file. Let's probably start by loading up Flash, should be good. Okay, so let's copy our folder location, and we're going to make a new ActionScript 3. This banner is an MPU, so it's 300 pixels by 250, 24 frames per second, that's industry standard, and let's go OK. Let's go ahead and save our source in the correct folder, and we'll call this sample banner. And also mention the dimensions 300 by 250. We'll go ahead and set up our publish settings. And we want to put that in the bin folder. Same with the HTMLs. And although we're doing ActionScript 3, we want to publish for the lowest time it's now to reach the most people, so we'll go Flash Player 9. There we go. Okay, so once again, this is our banner. First thing that we want to do is bring in this JPEG to act as our template and our guide so we can set copy and set images and everything else. So, once again, let's make sure we get our paths all set up. All right, and let's bring in that template file. Might as well bring in the rest of everything, and we'll just have it there. So let's organize our library. It's nice to keep things in folders and tidy so that it's easy for the next developer who might have to jump in on your project and to edit things so that way everything's going to be in a place where they can easily find it. So we'll make a bitmaps folder to hold all of our bitmaps. Put those in there. Let's go ahead and create new folders to hold classes, such as our banner class, movie clips, and graphics. All right. Now let's put our template back on the main timeline there. Let's change our snap settings to pixels. Oh, it's already done for us. Good. And we'll name this layer template and make it a guide layer so it doesn't publish with our movie. Now it's a good idea and good practice, of course, to name all of your layers. Again, this is so subsequent developers onto the project know where everything is, even yourself, because you might find you revisit something later. So it's good to keep it nice and tidy. So let's start by drawing a white background, 300 by 250. All banners need a solid background. And we'll name this a movie clip. MC background. Let's put that 00. Make sure to name our instance and name our layer. So our MC background movie clip here in the symbol library matches the instance name MC background. It's only used once, and it also matches our layer name. This makes it easy to understand, what asset belongs to what, and keeps, again, for the next developer to jump into the project, it's very obvious to them. So I've already imported all of my bitmaps and assets and I placed them into this bitmaps folder in the library. This includes a template of the banner that we're creating and some of the bitmap assets that we're not able to convert into vectors. I've also gone ahead and made a background. I've named that MC background, and I've placed that onto the stage. You'll notice that the instance name matches MC background, and so does the layer. That's again to help communicate to other developers or to yourself in the future if you should have to work on the project to make sure you know what asset is what and where it belongs. I've also gone ahead and set up the publish settings so that everything is exporting properly to the bin folder, and it's publishing for Flash Player 9, ActionScript 3. You also see I've set up these extra folders here, classes and graphics, trying to keep the library nice and orderly, sort things into where they need to go, again, making it easier for other developers or for yourself in the future to find things if you need to. So let's go ahead and create some more assets. So you can see I've dropped the template here on the stage. I've put it on a guide layer. So let's get things all nice and lined up. And we'll make a new layer. I'll drop our cat image there. Put that at 1:1. It's always good to put things on whole pixels because you prevent things from anti-aliasing in an odd way. So let's give that a name. So we'll call it MC image. We're using Hungarian notation here, so MC standing for movie clip. And then I'll move that symbol into the correct folder. So there it is on the stage. All right, next I will create our text field. So let's eyedrop this color first. And let's change this to the correct font, which is Helvetica New Bold Condensed. I believe it's 21 points. So again, put this at whole numbers. Turn the outline on so it's easier to distinguish our copy from the template. Just a bit more. That looks good. And let's make this a symbol as well. Call it MC text 0, as this will be the first text that we display in the banner. Copy the same thing to instance name and into the layer name. And now let's go ahead and create the border. There's a 1-pix gray border all around the banner. So the best way I find to do that is to draw a single pixel by pixel square. And we'll change that into a graphic. And let's get our library sorted. Now with this, I will make it the stage dimensions. So what I've done is I've made a square pixel and I've just copied that instance 3 times on the main stage to make the border. I'm not going to do anything with this, so I'm just going to give it the name of border so that we know what it is, but I'm not actually going to make a symbol out of it and give it an instance name because we won't need to manipulate it. It will persist throughout the banner. Any banner with a light background, as you know, generally sites require it to have some sort of background or some sort of border so that way it separates itself from the rest of the site. And now we got a thin red line right here between the image and the copy. So actually, let's just reuse our square here. And let's change the tint value to our red there. That also needs to be the size of our stage width. Oops, wrong one. There, that's better. Get that positioned where we need to. That would be our line 1, or line 0, our first line. So, that's one frame of our banner done, as you can see. So let's move on to the other frames. Okay, so we've got all of our instances and symbols made that need to be made for the banner. You can see that we have several text layers, several pieces of text, and we've named those sequentially, so they go from 0 to 2. That'll help us tween through them better. Earlier I created a line symbol, MC line, named the symbol 0, but actually that line's exactly the same, so we can just make one symbol of it but have 2 instances, so we have a line 0 and a line 1, and they're placed at different parts of the banner. So that's just the template there behind that. Let me hide there. So there's our actual banner. So if we were to show just one frame at a time, so that would be our first frame of the banner. That would be the second frame. And that would be our final frame, our third frame. Now, we need to get all these assets into a class so that we can actually do something with them. So let's actually, on the stage, leave that there. So we will highlight all of these frames, and I'm going to cut those frames with the shortcut key. And here in my library, that's got a new symbol. We'll call that banner. Click OK. Now let's go into that, and now let's paste those frames Okay, now those frames have lost their registration into the right part, so let's highlight them all. Make sure that we get it on 0, 0. All right. Yep, that looks good. So back to the root here. Let's clean up all those extra layers. And this is where we'll put our banner instance. Let's move that into classes where it belongs in the library. Throw that on the main stage there. Put it at the 0, 0 registration point. And there we are. Now we just need to link it up. Now I've gone ahead and created the subclasses from the banner class I needed to. First one I've created is the sample banner abstract, and right now that's just empty and extends the banner class. And then we have the sample banner 300 by 250, and this one extends the abstract. So this is so in case there's any difference from the abstract, obviously per the different sizes of banners that you're making, you can make those adjustments here. So let's just copy this class name and go back to Flash, and there's our banner. Let's get this set up for exporting. And that's going to be our class. And we also need to make sure in the document setup that we get rid of automatically declared stage instances. This is so the common instances between the banners, we can do stuff with them on the abstract, but if we don't have to just have them custom on the final subclass, which is the sample banner 300 by 250. We'll save that. And let's test to see if we can publish yet. Yep. So there it is, and it's giving us an error because it can't construct the children. That's because all instances will have to make sure we name in our class. So that's what's next. All right, so now we're in our banner abstract, and we also have our sample banner 300 by 250. Well, probably the first thing we want to do is go into the sample banner and set our stage width and stage height parameters, or those are our private values. Those come from the banner master class here. Now, we like to set the stage width and the stage height simply because when you're testing the movie, you often find that the IDE, if you're doing bandwidth profiling or whatnot, it won't report the proper stage width as it should. So to just set these values seems to do better than you're consistently getting the right value, and any animation you're using based off the stage width or stage height is animating correctly. So let's do that in the constructor here. So stage width becomes 300 and stage height becomes 250. Now let's go back to our abstract. Now at the top here, let's go ahead and make our public variables. We need to declare all of our instances that are on the stage so we don't get an error. So let's start with background. What else do we have? We have 3 text fields. We have 2 lines. We have a logo. We also have an image. Now let's just go back to our Flash source here. And let's double check that I've got that correct. I haven't missed anything. So there's our lines, text fields, logo, image, and background. Hey, what do you know? Got it right the first time. All right. Now we need to look at what methods we need to override. For this is very simple, so we just need to override the reset function. Now again, the reset function comes from the superclass here, the banner class. And what this will do is it will be called every time the banner right before it starts its loop. So anything you want to kind of reset and get ready for the animation, this is the method in which you do it. So let's override that. So we want to make sure that we do what used to be done in the class, so we'll just highlight these things. I don't want to call the method with a super, only because I want to make sure that things happen in a very specific order. So I'm just going to plain out override this method. So we need to advance the loop, and we need to reset all of our clips. So we'll call the helper class reset clips. Now the first thing we probably want to do is have all of our text fields go to alpha 0, so that way they're invisible when they start. Since we want to do all the text fields and they're labeled sequentially, we can use this helper function set props. Now this we give it the base string, which we've named them similarly, so they all start with MC text. And then we pass it a object list, and we're just changing the alpha there. So that will set all of our text fields right at the start of the banner to 0. And if I show you that real quick, you can see we don't see our text fields. They're all gone. All right, next, let's take our image. Let's also alpha that to 0. And the same with our logo. And our lines, what I'd like to have them do is draw in from the sides. So let's take the first line, and we want its x value to equal, let's say, the stage width. And with the other line, let's set that to opposite of stage width, so it comes in from the left. And I think that sets up everything for us. So that's a reset function done. It's all ready to go. So all these things will be set right before the banner is ready to start its animation, and then it will call the setup animation. So the next function we need to override is the add animation method. Now that is the animation that will do our main animations for each loop. So make sure I'm getting the name correct. There we go. Now this is something that you want to make sure you use lots of comments and good spacing for, because again, lots of developers might jump into this, or you might jump into this at a later date, and you want to understand what's going on. So the first thing I like to do is I like to take the delay that's passed and just make that into a variable. And we'll start it at, we'll actually set that from the delay that's passed as a parameter into the method. I like to leave a comment for each frame of animation. So I'm doing 3 frames of animation, so almost like sections on a page, I am just kind of having a heading to distinguish between them. Actually, this method does return something. It returns a number. Just need to change that. And what we'll have it return is the ending delay time plus tween time. I'll describe tween time in a moment here. So, for our first frame, the first thing we're going to want to animate in is the line, I say. So let's add tween. Again, we're calling our helper function add tween, which will pass our variables and parameters and such to tween nano for us. So we're going to animate line 0. Now duration. We have 3 variables that we have set up and ready to go. Let me show those to you now. So in the banner class here at the top, we have frame time, tween time, and setup time. Frame time is the variable that we use for the waiting time. So you animate in a frame and you want to usually hold it there so people can read it before you animate out into the next frame. So that's what our frame time is, and generally we have that about 2.5 seconds. Our tween time is the duration for any transition, so the time it takes to actually animate the transition. Again, we've had this kind of default to a 1. Step time, now that is for making like a stagger animation, so you want animations to, like, perhaps you have 3 or 4 things animating on a single frame, and you want to layer that animation so it's cascaded, and that's what the step time will help you do. You can use that in your parameters. So let's go back to our abstract, add tween. It's asking for a duration, and we're going to put in our tween time. Now, first of all, what we're going to translate it to, we're going to translate the X. And now here is where another one of our helper functions comes in. What we have when the banner is called in the init function, the init function calls find movie clips. And what this will do is it will set initial values on all movie clips it finds and all nested movie clips. So this is very helpful because that means things that you've left on stage, you don't have to go write that down as a separate variable or a constant and store it somewhere. You know, it will be stored for you and you can use it. So we just need to go to our MC line 0, init values, and to the first X that it was. Set our delay next, and we actually don't have a delay at that time. And then our easing as well. I think we'll go with a nice ease out. And there we go. So let's give that a test and see where we're at. Yep, and there is our line animating in from the right, just as we wanted. So next what we want to do is we want to add a tween for the image and then the text. Now these tweens are both going to fade in. So what we can do is use the helper method add stagger. And this will help us cascade similar transitions over time. So add stagger. Provide this with the array of the things that we want to tween. Let's first tween in the image and then our first text field. And we're going to transition the alpha. Delay. So we want this to happen after our lines come in. But let's see what it looks like with it staggered. So we'll do step time there, plus equals step time. So they'll add to our delay. And I'm missing a parameter here. This is where we put the time we want to separate between each stagger. So we'll again do our step time there. And now let's save that and we'll animate that. This almost looks good. I think actually I'll change that delay to a tween time. There we go. Yes, I'm much happier with that. So let's continue on and add our tweens. Now the next thing we need to do is we tween that frame in. So now we want to tween it out. So the only thing that we're actually removing between frame 1 and frame 2 is the text. So let's just add tween. Now we want to wait our standard frame time for readability, so that is frame time. All right, and now when we play that back, see our banner animate in, and our text will animate out 2.5 seconds later. There's one mistake I've made here. Our add stagger is doing several tweens, so we want to make sure that affects our delay time properly. Now the add stagger will return an array, or no, I'm sorry, it returns an object. And that object contains an array of the tweens it's done, and also the delay time that it's been added to. So that way, it's properly, since you might have animated 5 or 6 things with an add stagger, you want to make sure the delay time is impacted properly, so that way you can keep using that variable as you go and make your cue list of all the tweens. So let's call that delay object afterwards and make sure we add that to our D time. And that way things will look more proportionate when we play them back. All right, let's do the next frame. Copy this to make our lives a little easier. So we just want to delay it by the tween time, so that way the text 1 animates out. And of course, we're talking about text, or text 0 animates out, then text 1 animates in after the delay time. And then it waits the frame time before it fades out into frame 3. Now actually, this is going to animate more out than just the text 1. So again, what we want to do is an add stagger. This time we're not going to have it stagger because we'd like things to fade out simultaneously. So let's actually make that 0, so they'll fade out both at the same time. We need to change that to frame time. We need to make sure the alpha goes where it needs to. All right. And then we will take our line. We also need to animate that out. We'll do that after those have gone. Make it an ease in, so it's the opposite of ease out. And let's have that go back to where it started, which is the stage width. And now on to the final frame. First we want to animate in the line. So let's just copy this line of code and animate line 1. Then we want to do another add stagger. And this will be our final piece of text, which is our call to action and the logo. It's handy too. I like to do this. Is a lot of requirements for banners, demand that the banner time be 10, 15, or under 30 seconds. So it's nice to know kind of where you sit per loop, so that way you know you're delivering things per the requirements. We'll just trace out and call that, oops, loop duration. All right, so let's take a look and see what we got, see if it's working good. Well, we didn't quite get it right, so let's see where we're going wrong. Let's make sure that our instance is labeled. It looks like it is, so that's good. Let's go back to our banner here. This is where we went wrong. We're not actually telling it to alpha in. So let's try that again. See if we're any happier. Not much better. Okay, so that is our loop. We can see down here it's outputted our loop duration as 12 seconds. So now what we need to do is, you can see we didn't actually transition out our final frame, and that's because when we go through our final loop, we want to make sure that it doesn't animate that out so it has some place to rest and people aren't looking at a blank banner ad. So what we want to override is our add animation loop method, and that's part of, again, the superclass. And this is what's called at the end of every loop. And it kind of helps set, a nice transition so that the banner can go back to where it's ready to reset and begin the banner again. So let's go to our abstract. Now this doesn't return anything. And again, I like to just have the dTime variable act as my delay. Now for an end frame, we generally like that to hold for double the frame time. We're actually not going to multiply that there, we're going to add to the delay. So we want to animate out something similar like we did in frame 2. So let's just copy that code. And we're taking the logo out, text 2, and line 1 has to go out to the left. And we can get rid of our frame time there because we've already added that into our variable up at the top. And now what we want to do is actually do a delayed call to the reset function. Delayed call is another helper method that will basically pass the variables we have to the tween nano delayed call. Okay, so now let's try our banner again. Beautiful. Now, a few seconds, it should hold loop for us. There we go. And that was our second loop. By default, we have our banners loop 3 times. You'll have some requirements come through where you can only do it in two loops because you're limited to maybe 30 seconds, or maybe 1 loop because that's the requirements of the site is just a single loop. So that would be a 3rd loop, and here it should stay, and we don't see anything happen. Yep, I think it's safe. It's working as it should. Now we do have an extra method that we rarely use. It's called add animation end. Now that is something you can override and use should your end frame need to display something extra that it normally wouldn't. Say maybe there's a second call to action or something to that effect where basically your end frame when the banner comes to a complete stop and is no longer looping needs to be different from the end frame it had when it was looping. So that about does it. We have a loop, or we have a banner that's working. Let's just override a few things just to show you how we would set those up. And again, we go in our abstract. Now I said we had our frame times and we had our tween times. So maybe we want our tween time to be a bit quicker. Also, maybe we only can have 1 loop. So we would do that in the constructor of our subclass, the abstract. So I'd set our loop max to 1. And let's set our tween time to, let's say, a ½ second. And let's see what that would look like. Here we go. Now you may want to do some effect or something additional to the animation rather than tweens or that sort of fading in the alpha or that are just moving things for the X or the Y. Perhaps a filter. Now if the file size requirements allow for it, you can go into the abstract here and override a bunch of things. So basically instead of using tween nano you can use tween light. But oftentimes we'll find that we just don't have the file space to use TweenLight and use the plugins that Greenstock's developed, so that we'll just write our own functions to kind of do filter transitions or something fancier by ourselves. So below these I'll write a new function, and I'm going to call this init blur. And in here we're going to provide a movie clip that we want to blur and the blur amount. And then I'll write another method here. We'll call this update blur. And again, we'll provide a movie clip. That's all that we'll need. So, with the init blur, we need to make sure that we import our blur filter. And now back down to our methods. So what we'll do is we'll make a dynamic parameter here called blur onto our movie clip, and we'll set that to it as pass to us, and then we'll update the blur on the movie clip. We'll create a new blur filter here. And we'll make that by whatever the blur is set to on the movie clip. Quality we'll just leave at 1. It's a banner, so we do want it to perform relatively well on most machines. I believe the international standards have CPU performance for banners at being 20% or under, which is sometimes hard to achieve, but keeping your filter qualities at a low level will help. So there's our filter, and we need to push that to our movie clip. And of course, filters have to be an array, so let's make a new array. Have it with a filter there. Great. So, what should we blur? Well, let's blur the logo. Let's say we want that to blur in. So, we'll do that in our reset function. We'll init the blur. Oops, let's make sure we set it to something. Now, we generally don't like to hard code values. Let's say we want to start at 30 blur. What's nicer and more readable is to put a constant at the top of the class. And that way, especially if you're doing a blur, you might be blurring other objects and such, and you want to reuse that same value. So, get rid of that hard-coded value there and use the constant. Alright, now we're going to have to get rid of this stagger function, because now we're doing something different with the logo here. So let's make this an add tween. And make sure we get rid of the bracket there for the array. And also get rid of all that other stuff that we don't need. So let's remove the blur by having it go to 0. And we'll have to do the same thing below here, so let's just highlight both of those. Oops. All right, let's give this a test and see if it works good. Ooh, we're almost there. It blurred for us. What we forgot to do was add an update parameter. So the logo needs an on update. Let's add that into our premise list. On update. Update the blur. On update params. See logo. And of course we'll need that down here as well. Let's give that a try. There we go. Beautiful. Of course, we still have it set to one loop, so we won't see it fade off. One other thing I'd like to cover, if I haven't already, is the click tag. Now, in our banner class, in the init method, it calls a new click tag button. So we have another class here for a click tag button. Now this one, what it does is it waits till it adds to the stage. It will draw an invisible button for us, and it will bind a mouse event on it. And it will do, go to the root and look at the parameters for the default click tag and add that on automatically. So that way, anywhere you click in the banner, it is exiting to the click tag. Now, should you have two click tags or some other button that has to happen in the banner, you can override the init function and make your own click tag. But for the standard and most average banners, there's one exit link. That's it. And there's no other interaction in the banner. So we find this is a good method or class to have that's ready to go. Bam, you've got your click button taken care of. And as you can see, the whole banner, I've got the right icon with my hand there, hand cursor. It's all clickable. So there we go. That is how we make banners with our banner framework.